Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. What is the creepiest thing you've heard a child say? True story, this creeped me the FCK out. I worked as one of those people who will try to sell you crap you don't need, except it was food. So I'm doing cream cheese and bagels and I have customers coming up to me, different flavors of cream cheese yada yada. Then I see a regular and her kid. Now I've experienced this regular and her 5-year-old several times, and the kid seems kind of off. Maybe a bit slow? Maybe? No. Anyway, so I'm asking him what flavor he wants. He tells me, and he says, "I want to watch you put it on the bagel. Are you going to use a knife?" Hairs on the back of my neck stand up and I'm like, oh, okay. So I start to put it on there and he says, "Go slower." Oh my god. You're 5. Take your bagel and cream cheese. Just thinking about that day makes me shiver. That child is going to grow up to be something evil. When I started dating my wife, her 4-year-old niece looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you make her cry, we'll take you out into the woods and leave you there." We asked my 5-year-old cousin who she was talking to in the den. She said with excitement I was showing Pap my dolls. He had passed that morning but we hadn't told her yet. A kid leaned over to me in church once and whispered, "For a minute there I thought you were a cyclops." My high school girlfriend has a little brother who was like 3 to 4 at the time. One day we were babysitting him and playing with cars on the floor. Out of nowhere, he starts looking really concerned and looking around. We keep playing, but he stands up, and walks straight into the garage. We followed him in there and he just kept looking toward the wall and started crying. My girlfriend kept asking him what was wrong, and he through all of his weeping he gets out, he says I'm his. Still freaks me out just thinking about it. "You think I'm SI?" A second grader asking me as I was fixing a computer, "WTF is with these kids today?" I had to just ignore because these damn kids could lie and would have probably told their teachers and parents if I said anything and I would have been in deep SHT because it's a kid's word against mine. My son, at the age of 5, talking about Minecraft. "I killed the creeper and then burned down his house." Oh, I should have burned down his house with him inside it, doing both things at once. Yeah, I don't even know where you've been playing Minecraft, but you need to take a break from it for a while. Figuring out how to best kill someone and destroy their property is not a skill you need quite yet. Every time I took my toddler out for a walk he would look up at the sky and say fire, and extend his arms up motioning to the whole sky. He did this every single time he stepped outside and would repeat it throughout the walk. Turned out that he would watch this cartoon that teaches him about the solar system and it always showed the sun as a big ball of fire. Who is that white guy that always comes in my room at night? I used to teach swimming lessons for preschoolers, and we had this one kid named Cass who was the cutest little guy ever, also one of the only one brave enough to let us take him out in the deep end with a life jacket on. I think the little guy was talking about me. When mommy kisses me goodnight she puts her tongue in my mouth. My friend babysat a little girl and told me she said this. Little girl by herself at the pool and starts diving and swimming near a group. She looks over at us and says I live in your nightmares, then dove into the pool and we didn't see her again. One summer my Korean neighbors were having a little cousin of theirs visit from Japan. She is Korean, just lives there. Her name was Una. There are 4 of my Korean neighbors. There is a girl 1 year younger than me, and girl who was about 9 at the time, a boy who was 7, and a 4-year-old. Now the kids' first language was Korean. The 2 older girls spoke perfect English. The older boy spoke English, but broken and his sentence structure was very bad. The littlest one spoke a little bit, but only enough to communicate what he wanted. Una was about 7. Una was a huge BTCH for being only 7. You may think I'm being harsh, but I am not. Una was an only child who was spoiled to no end. She demanded things to be her way, hit all the kids when they died, give her their ice cream, even the girl who was my age at the time, about 14 to 15. The older girl said she spewed complete filth and nasty comments to them. Even the 4-year-old. She was visiting the entire summer and we were only 2 weeks in and she was making everyone's life hell. The moms did nothing about it, at all, leaving the little ones helpless. Mostly just how to yell and tell kids to stop fighting. I babysat a lot. But there was nothing I could do. Yuna was a vicious tyrant spitting out Korean and Japanese swears. She lived in Japan but was Korean. At one point, the older boy, her age, was tired of her, taking his toys, ice cream, money, and hitting him. He had had enough. Remember, he spoke English but it was very broken. The only way to get away from Yuna is to kill myself. He proceeds to lock himself in the bathroom. He also screamed from inside the bathroom. If I never see Yuna again, it'll be too soon. In perfect, flawless English. Where did he hear these things? I have no idea. But it was goddamn creepy and terrifying to hear from a 7-year-old who has just locked himself in the bathroom to a 15-year-old girl babysitting like 4 kids. The older sister was out with friends. But God, I hated that girl too. If I ever see Yuna again, it'll be too soon. I was playing D&D at a coworker's house. His quiet 9-year-old daughter tugged on my sleeve, so I assumed she wanted me to get her some food. Instead, she led me to their Great Dane kennel and said in a loud, suggestive voice, "I'm a bad doggy. Please spank me, master." I was working at a kids' summer camp and had to go with this 6-year-old boy to the bathroom. While he was washing his hands, he looked at me while smiling and said, "Is your dad dead?" I looked at him and said, "No. He's not." Then the kid said, "Well, why isn't he?" Wasn't sure how to respond to that. When I was babysitting for my neighbors, a kid walked up to me and said he's coming. When I asked who, he just pointed at the door of the living room. A kid I used to go to school with was obsessed with me, to the point of stalking me, and he tried to force me to be his girlfriend. When I told him no, he said he'd break into my house and make me his forever. I'm so glad he got expelled a few days later. My wife's niece had an imaginary friend when she was 2 to 3 years old. Not unusual on the surface, but her imaginary friend had the same name as her grandfather, who had died 15 years prior, and she seemed to know stories from her dad and aunts, my wife's, life when they were kids. So I was talking to this little girl about her friend and she said, "Yeah, name, says he can come down from the clouds whenever he wants, he just has to sneak out." Some of the things the little girl in this documentary Child of Rage says are creepy as FCK. When, for example, she explains how she tortures her little brother, kills animals, and would like to stab her adopted parents to death. A friend of a friend brought their 3-year-old grandson to her house. We alerted both adult parties, but unfortunately there doesn't seem to be any real consequences for this kid. My sister was threatened by a 5-year-old in 1995. He went up to her with a butter knife and said he'd slit her throat if she didn't give him her Alanis Morissette CD. I'm tired. Normally, that wouldn't be creepy, but this particular kid attended a day camp that I CID'd for, and I happened to have been told by the staff that he was prone to seizures, and that right before they happened he would say he was tired. Kid got me all freaked out for nothing. 4 to 5 years old came up to me and was pointing towards the arcade room. "Come play with me." I said, "I'm busy, I'm sorry." "Go ask, insert girl name." The little girl was like, "If you don't come play with me I'll choke myself," then just stared at me. Then eventually left. I work in the ER. Once a little girl came in. Her mom found her in her room, dragging/scraping a pencil up and down her shin bone. When her mother asked what she was doing, she said, "I'm just doing my math homework." She would not look at her siblings, and kept saying she didn't have any. She kept eerily staring at her parents, repeating, "You're not supposed to be here," in an all-knowing, matter-of-fact voice. They brought her to the ER, and they brought along a few sticky notes and drawing that she'd done that night. They looked exactly like something from a horror movie. One had death written in large letters in the middle of the sticky note, and smaller crowded together repeating death as covering the rest of the note. One said, "I know your sisters and I will defeat them without any fear." One said, "Prepare for battle on the trampoline. It begins at sunset." It was disturbing. I was on the bus and this little girl and her mom get on. She takes one look at me and bursts into inconsolable tears. Her mom is doing everything she can to make her stop, but all to no avail. This happened about 3 years ago. I went on a vacation with my parents to go see some family in Calgary, Alberta. They were pretty young parents and had 2 kids, one 6 and the other 3. Both were born with pretty bad speech impediments and the 6-year-old barely talked, while the 3-year-old couldn't. One of the last stops of the day was to an old mine that had some houses that miners supposedly lived in. My parents and the 3-year-old kid went into one building while I took the 6-year-old with me. He elaborated, "Boy killed girl in the neck with a knife and put her in a closet. Boy left after." Needless to say, I SHD my pants and got the hell out of Dodge. After we stopped in the gift shop, however, I asked the cashier if there has ever been a haunting here, and she told me that exact story. Okay, so I used to volunteer at a really old nursing home for really old people. It was all Japanese, so most of them had witnessed World War II. The oldest lady there was 105 at the time. So I'm helping the other volunteers bring out food in the dining room, and another helper was this woman and her little daughter, maybe 8 or 9. The kid came up to me with a plate of food above her head, cause she was short, and was trying to give it to me, who was taller. How many times do you give the poisons foods to the peoples before they go die? I don't think she understood that the elderly people there died from their old age. And she probably thought they died because we gave them poisonous food. I've told the story a few times, but I like it, so here goes. I was doing a placement in a primary school, working with 7 to 8-year-olds. A girl named Emily, lovely little demon's pawn. Ginger hair, black eyes, looks up at me from her maths work and, "DS, I bet you're tired of this boring old school." Me, out of my f***ing mind. As you get older you realize school isn't so bad, it is actually kind of fun. DS, oh, a few seconds pass. DS, you're going to die in a school. A little giggle passes through the other kids at the table. I'm left quietly trying to process the conversation logically. Let's play Poison the Baby. My little sister used to look out the window in the car, and sometimes at home, and talk to herself when she was 3 or 4. My niece and I were playing with my son at my mom's house. We were having a nice Power Rangers battle with the old school weapons my mom kept for me to give my children. My niece had the little red sword and started poking me with it. I told her to stop and that it wasn't nice. She told me, "You can't talk." I work at a preschool. Over the years I have heard the kids say some creepy/funny things. One little boy who was 5 always had strange things to say. This happened to me at work last week. They're weird. My co-worker and I stared at each other and they said, "Well, that's disturbing." The girls were around 8 years old maybe. My brother was once wrestling his friend for fun. They were 13-ish years old. His friend grabs him around the neck and yells, "Die on the cross," like a white person. I babysat a kid once that told me he wanted to put his dad in one of those bags that suck the air out of it, and run the dad over with a 4-wheeler. A friend got his 2-year-old a lettuce knife so she'd stop asking to use real knives. One night she looked around the corner with the knife in hand, asked to take it to bed, and when they said, she half sang, "I know where you sleep. I love you, ooh, ooh, ooh." Created an account for this. I was hanging out with an ex-GF in my parents' living room a few years back when my little brother, approximately 10 years/0 at the time, walks into the room looking a little bit dazed and confused. He was sleepwalking a lot around this time. I asked him, "Little bro's name, buddy, are you okay? What are you looking at?" And his reply was, "Them. They're watching. They'll be here soon." I see dead people. What the FCK is wrong with kids these days? There was a set of demon twins when I worked in after-school daycare. Creepy. On a shopping trip to Lowe's, my son told me that we couldn't leave out of a certain set of doors because they were broken. There was a sign on the door, but he's not able to read yet, so I asked him how he knew the doors wouldn't work. He said, "The lady with the long hair you can't see told me." I once heard my friend's 4-year-old son tell his brother that if he didn't do what he wanted he'd put him in a wheelchair. We once got a call from my little brother's elementary school asking about the household and if his family life was okay, since he had been doing math and writing word problems about subtracting enemy students from the rest of the class. I was reading to my niece in bed one day and she had a shelf above her bed that was pretty empty. She made a comment about the guy up there and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she pointed to that shelf and reiterated that there was a guy up there. I knew it wasn't real, but hearing a 3-year-old be so sure of something was too much for me and I bailed. My 7-year-old niece said to her then pregnant mother, "It's not a baby in there, it's a monster, and when you go to sleep he climbs out and talks to me about blood." If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.